Hello and welcome to Ncoda's National Monthly Webinar. My name is Steven Zeiter and I am a project manager with Ncoda. We have some great speakers and many interesting topics in store, so I'm very excited to get started. I would like to review some features and controls of Zoom. If you joined us by phone, you will only be able to listen to the webinar. If you joined us by computer or the Zoom mobile app, your mic will be muted by default. However, you are able to ask questions and contribute to the conversation in a few different ways. First, if you have a question that you would like to ask via message, please click on the Q&A option on your screen. If you would like to ask a question or contribute using your microphone, please select the Raise Hand option on your screen. It will then turn green and it will notify the host that you raised your hand. The host will then give you the option to unmute your mic. The host will then prompt you to unmute your mic during a designated period, allowing you to ask a question. As always, regarding mic etiquette, please mute your microphone if you are not speaking. Before we get into today's presentation, I wanted to share some great news. You can now find Ncoda videos on both YouTube and Vimeo. The videos include highlights from past national meetings, as well as snippets from previous national monthly webinars, including PQI and Clinical Corner presentations. These videos are designed to allow all Ncoda members to remain engaged. To see these videos, visit YouTube or Vimeo and type in the keyword Ncoda. We have a full agenda today. Presenters from 10 different states will be speaking. First, our opening remarks will be delivered by Victoria Eno of Ncoda. Next, our PQI clinical overview on Ibrutinib Management by Jody Agina. Women and Infants Hospital of Rhode Island is our practice in focus this month. Jenna Solomon will talk about her practice. Latha Radhakrishnan from the University of Illinois Cancer Center will give our Clinical Corner presentation on Stivarga for metastatic colorectal cancer, sponsored by Bayer. A fellow national nonprofit organization, the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, will be highlighted by Patrice Brown. Marie Garcia will provide us with an update on next week's Ncoda Spring Forum. Jonathan Medeiros will talk about policy updates on the Accumulator program as part of our current issues and effective practices section. Beth Delasky will speak on her experience in Ncoda's capecitabine treatment support kit beta test. Rounding out the call, Oncology Pharmacy Technician Association Chair Carol Hemmersbach will provide us with an update on the association. Matt Schulz will highlight Ncoda's discussion board, and finally, I will talk about Ncoda's student professional organizations. First up, to talk about our mission statement, new member practices, and sponsors is Victoria Eno from Ncoda. Victoria.
Thanks, Stephen. Ncoda's mission statement is, our focus is to advance the value of dispensing practices for oncology physicians. We will provide leadership, expertise, quality of standards, and sharing of best practices with all members. We will deliver positive outcomes through collaboration with all stakeholders involved in the care of oncology patients. We would like to welcome our new members who have joined since last month's webinar. American Health Network, Indiana, Auroras Medical, Texas, Bridgeport Hospital, Connecticut, Connecticut Oncology Group, Connecticut, Geisinger Health Systems, Western Region Clinics in Pennsylvania, Great Plains Oncology in Nebraska, Hendricks Region Health in Indiana, Home Healthcare, Alabama, Houston Metro Urology in Texas, Johns Hopkins Hospital in Maryland, Masonic Cancer Clinic in Minnesota, Massachusetts General North Shore Cancer Center in Massachusetts, Murray-Conaway County Hospital Regional Cancer Center in Kentucky, McLaurin Greater Lansing Hospital in Michigan, National Institutes of Health, Virginia affiliate in Virginia, New York Cancer and Blood Specialist in New York, Proprium Pharmacy in Virginia, University of California, Los Angeles in California. We'd like to acknowledge our new sponsors. On behalf of Ncoda, we would like to thank some of our new annual platinum sponsors. Athenex, Beijing, Celgene, Novartis, Puma Biotechnology, and Seattle Genix. Thank you for supporting Ncoda's mission. I want to take a minute to acknowledge our sponsors for this month's national webinar. Bayer. Bayer is supporting our Clinical Corner presentation today. Thank you for your support. Ncoda is growing by leaps and bounds. Earlier this month, we reached a wonderful milestone of over 1,000 members. We are now at 1,800 members and over 340 practices strong. Working together, we become stronger.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Prior to our PQI clinical overview, I would like to invite Matt Scholes to talk about Ncoda's PQI and PQI in Action initiatives. Matt.
Thanks, Stephen. As many of you may know, the PQI is one of our most important foundational elements at Ncoda. PQI is a very concise, scientific, peer-reviewed document used to improve patient care for the entire medically integrated team. To date, we've published over 20 PQIs, and in 2019, our goal is to publish at least 20 new PQIs. As you can tell, that may lead to a need for more authors, so if anyone is interested, please let us know. In addition, we also have the PQI in Action initiative, in which we highlight one particular practice and their use of the PQI and leads to a particular patient outcome. We are currently looking for practices who utilize the regorafenib PQI, and there will be more coming down the pipeline. So anybody interested in having an article published about their service, please let us know. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Next up with our PQI clinical overview is Jody Agina, clinical pharmacist at Virginia Cancer Specialists. Jody will speak about the PQI that he wrote on Ibrutinib Management. Jody.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to go through a quick overview of the PQI that we all collaborated on and wrote up on Ibrutinib Management. First off, Ibrutinib is a small molecule that acts as a potent, irreversible inhibitor of Bruton's tyrosine kinase, a key component of the B-cell receptor and cytokine receptor pathway. BTK inhibition is vital for decreased malignant B-cell proliferation and survival. This molecule disrupts the proliferation of B-cell cancers, such as mantle cell lymphoma, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, marginal zone lymphoma, and Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia. Managing both medication dosing and adverse effects are prime examples of key areas for additional intervention opportunities for improved patient health outcomes within the medically integrated team. Dosing of ibrutinib varies by disease and indication, and should be carefully assessed. Although the dose may stabilize over time, drug interactions frequently occur with common anti-infective agents. Of note, lymphocytosis is a noted adverse effect of the drug, which results in increased counts of lymphocytes in the blood. It's a common and expected occurrence, which does not reflect the progression of disease, and action should not be taken upon this. Monitoring patient laboratory values must be considered and evaluated based on patient's needs. Upon receiving a new prescription of ibrutinib, the PQI process begins as first confirming the appropriate dose and making sure that it corresponds to the appropriate indication, monitoring CBCs at baseline, monthly, and as clinically necessary, monitoring chemistries, uric acid levels at baseline, monthly, and as clinically necessary, as well as looking at taking an EKG at baseline, especially for patients with positive cardiac history or risk factors associated, and as periodically necessary. We must also evaluate patients that are on anticoagulation, including aspirin, for the increased bleeding risk. The use of anticoagulation with ibrutinib should also be assessed with each patient based on risk versus benefit. It's also recommended to withhold treatment 3 days pre and post for minor surgical procedures and pre and post for 7 days for major surgeries. Consider PJP prophylaxis in patients with increased risk of opportunistic infections. Note that lymphocytosis, as mentioned before, is a common occurrence and usually resolves by week 8 of therapy. And again, it does not reflect disease progression. Lastly, monitor for drug interactions, adherence, and adverse events. The dosing guidelines are as follows, with the references listed on the right-hand side. But for CLL, the dose is 420 daily. Mantle cell 560, marginal zone 560 milligrams. Waldenstrom's is 420, and it also has a chronic GVHD indication, which is 420 milligrams as well. Adverse effects that are associated with ibrutinib are, we listed the most prevalent adverse reactions from top to bottom. So diarrhea, fatigue, musculoskeletal pain, peripheral edema, respiratory tract infections, nausea, vomiting, and bruising. The grade 3s and above, grade 3 and 4 adverse reactions are listed on the right-hand side with hemorrhage, infections, cytopenias, cardiac arrhythmias, secondary malignancies, and hypertension. Recommended dose modifications for toxicity. So on your first toxicity occurrence in the mantle cell and the marginal zone space, when your starting dose is 560, you're going to go down one dose level to 420. Oh, I'm sorry. On your first occurrence, you're going to restart at 560. And then on your second occurrence, you're going to go down to 420, and then 280, and then discontinue. As far as the other indications where your starting dose is 420, you're going to go down to 280, down to 140, and then you discontinue thereafter. As far as patient-centered activities where we can help with the care of the patient, providing an oncology chemotherapy education sheet is vital. Ensuring that each and every patient understands the formulation prescribed and how to take the dose. Of note, when this medication first came out, it was only available in capsules. Now they're available in tablets and capsules. So it's important for the pharmacy technician as well as the pharmacist to understand the dosage forms and the available dosage forms on which they come. For the most part, patients are going to administer once daily. It's usually one tablet, but sometimes capsules. Orally once daily with a glass of water. Swallow the capsules or tablets whole. If a dose of ibrutinib is not taken at the scheduled time, it can be taken on as soon as possible on the same day, but we want to urge patients not to double up. As far as signs and symptoms of monitoring, abnormal bruising, bleeding, especially those on anticoags, GI tolerance concerns, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, as well as assessing any new medications for risk of QT prolongation, drug-drug interactions, as well as with anti-infective drugs. Lastly, adherence is a big part. Evaluate if patient has missed any doses between cycles and determine if interventions are needed. Lastly, ibrutinib management, drug interactions. CYP3A4 inducers, strong inducers, will decrease or may decrease the serum concentration of ibrutinib, i.e. carbamazepine, rifampin, phenytoin, and St. John's wort. The recommendation is to avoid. As far as CYP3A4 inhibitors, parentheses strong, this may increase the concentration of ibrutinib. Avoid concomitant use of ibrutinib and strong CYP3A4 inhibitors together. And this is ketoconazole, itraconazole, voriconazole, pulsaconazole, clarithromycin, and telithromycin. The recommendation is to avoid these as well. Live vaccines are something that may diminish, or I'm sorry, immunosuppressants may enhance the toxic effect of vaccines and may diminish the therapeutic effect of the vaccine. So you should avoid live vaccines. Live attenuated vaccines should not be given for at least 3 months after immunosuppressants. Warfarin and other anticoagulants increases the bleeding risk. This is secondary analysis to the RESONATE trial, where phase 1 study participants on anticoagulation and ibrutinib, and what they found was that ibrutinib acts as a, anticoagulant and increases the bleeding risk in 10 to 20% of these patients. These events were typically observed in conjunction with other factors such as coexisting medical conditions and/or concurrent medications. And lastly, the references, and if there's any questions or concerns with these, you can email me or contact me there.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Jody, for that great presentation. And if anyone does have questions, please feel free to enter those in the chat or Q&A box, and we'll be sure to get to those. In the interest of time, we are going to move on to our next presentation. Also, Jody's PQI on Ibrutinib Management will be available on the Ncoda website this afternoon. Thanks again, Jody. It is my pleasure to introduce our practice in focus this month, Women and Infants Hospital in Rhode Island. Representing women and infants is clinical pharmacist Jenna Solomon. Jenna will speak a little bit about her practice and why she joined Ncoda and how her and her team are partnering with Ncoda now and how they would like to continue to partner with Ncoda moving forward. Jenna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Stephen. So as mentioned, I do work at Women and Infants Hospital. So this is a teaching hospital of the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University, and we're located in Providence, Rhode Island. So to focus first on our Providence location, we have a gynecologic oncology clinic in which we are staffed with 7 gynecologic oncologists, 4 nurse practitioners, 4 gyn-onc fellows, and 1 nurse navigator. We also have a breast health center that's comprised of 3 medical oncologists, 2 breast fellows, 2 nurse navigators, 5 breast surgeons, and 1 plastic surgeon. At our main infusion site, we have a total of 10 full-time infusion and 3 per diem nurses. Also, as a part of our services, we do have palliative care embedded into our services on both the inpatient and outpatient side. We have genetic counselors, as well as a women's intimacy and sexual health clinic. In addition to our Providence location, we also have off-site infusion centers with provider offices located in Westerly, Warwick, and Fall River. As far as our mission and value, we are committed to improving the health and well-being of women and infants and to providing our essential services regardless of ability to pay. Specifically focusing on our pharmacy services, we do employ 4.5 full-time pharmacists and 2 technicians for the purpose of order verification and preparation, along with a sterile products pharmacist, 2 investigational drug services pharmacists, as well as 2 oncology pharmacy specialists, including myself. Brittany Regala is our other oncology pharmacy specialist, and she is a clinical assistant professor at URI, and Women and Infants is her practice site, where she works with the inpatient gyn-onc service, as well as the palliative care clinic. I work as an oncology pharmacist, and my focus is on outpatient oncology care, specifically with patients receiving oral chemotherapy. And to help me, I do have a pharmacy liaison. Our technician is an integral part of our team and has been here well before I started. So I started at Women and Infants in September of 2018. Since then, my focus has been standardizing the process for which oral chemotherapy patients are managed. And this is a huge part of why I joined Ncoda. I was made aware of this organization through Brittany, who's actually one of the co-chairs of the OCE committee. Brittany and I both recognize the importance of Ncoda's work in contributing to the development of patient resources in collaboration with HOPA, ONS, and ACCC. And so considering that my job focuses on really standardizing the process for patients receiving oral chemotherapy, I was quickly drawn to the wealth of information that's made available to this organization. As a new oncology pharmacist myself, I chose to join in order to take advantage of these resources and to also learn from the examples of many of you guys who have been in this field much longer than I have and have been able to standardize this process. And with respect to our oral chemotherapy service, while we've made some strides since I started here, we certainly have a long way to go. And one of our biggest goals is to have our own specialty pharmacy. And so I look to Ncoda to help continue to provide us resources justifying the use of medically integrated dispensing services as we work towards creating a similar practice model. And we greatly appreciate the work that's been done so far, including such things as the PQIs, which I do use for niraparib, as well as many others. And I would like to be more involved with Ncoda personally. I am currently a member of the OCE committee, and for the time being, I have elected to join the foundational second tier just to allow myself the opportunity to get fully acclimated to my new position at Women and Infants. However, in the upcoming year, I hope to increase my involvement with the OCE committee and continue to get involved with the summits as well. And so as I look to the future, challenges that I see that I hope Ncoda will help with will just be a shift towards a practice model that better accommodates our patients on oral chemotherapy. And this will be necessary as the number of FDA-approved agents continues to increase. So that's all I have, and thank you for highlighting our practice for today.
Great. Thank you again, Jenna. And for everyone listening, you can find Women and Infants Hospital Practice and Focus application available on the Ncoda website under our Practice and Focus webpage. So thank you again. Latha Radhakrishnan, clinical pharmacist at the University of Illinois Cancer Center in Illinois, will now deliver our Clinical Corner presentation sponsored by Bayer. This month's Clinical Corner presentation is on Stivarga for metastatic colorectal cancer. Latha.
Thank you, Stephen, for the introduction. Many thanks to Ncoda for inviting me to speak and to Bayer for sponsoring the presentation. Many of you will find some of the information presented today as a review, given that Stivarga or regorafenib isn't a recent approval by any means. However, I hope to engage you all in a reboost of vintage information as well as introduce some relatively new data. Next slide, Stephen. Okay, so let's start off with a quick overview of metastatic colorectal cancer, which I will now refer to as MCRC. As oncology pharmacist, I think this is a cancer that we all have some good experience with, given it's the third most diagnosed cancer type, and unfortunately, the second leading cause of cancer-related deaths, with the 2019 stats showing new cases as an estimated 140,000 or so, and deaths as 50,000 patients. The average risk is 1 in 20 patients, but this is all dependent on risk factors. And so for the purposes of time, I've listed those risk factors there, and I think we're all familiar with those. Those can be lifestyle risk factors as well as genetics plays a part in colorectal cancer. While 90% of new cases occur in patients that are older than 50, the recommended screening or colonoscopy has changed relatively recently to 45 years of age. In my years of practice, it's sadly hard to forget those 35 to 45-year-old patients with mets everywhere because it just wasn't on anyone's radar due to their young age. While early stages of CRC are curable with surgery and perhaps adjuvant chemotherapy and other modalities, the treatment of MCRC is still challenging, with systemic treatment being the backbone. When you look at the 5-year survival after diagnosis for overall CRC, it is 65%. Unfortunately, while there have been many advances in the treatment for MCRC, the 5-year survival is still a dismal 14%. Next slide, Stephen. Okay, so this slide is it's a very, very basic overview of systemic treatment in MCRC. For more details, we can obviously refer to guidelines. We know that initial treatment is often a combination of various chemotherapeutic agents with or without targeted therapies, depending on gene mutations, specifically KRAS and BRAF. When I first started in practice, it seemed like one size fits all, but now we know that we are identifying predictive biomarkers and therapies are becoming more individualized. Immunotherapy has made its way into the systemic treatment options and MCRC in patients displaying deficient mismatch or microsatellite instability. While this is a conversation that could be a clinical corner on its own, I will be speaking to a study looking at microsatellite patients receiving immunotherapy or regorafenib in the next few slides, so stay tuned. If we look at NCCN guidelines, in a very simplistic and brief summary, we see that initial therapy starts off with, at least a 5-FU based regimen listed in the bullet points. No one is preferred over the other. So if you have a patient with inflammatory bowel disease, the provider may pick FOLFOX over FOLFIRI due to the irinotecan component. And similarly, if we have a patient that has diabetes or is a guitarist, the provider may pick FOLFIRI as the initial regimen over FOLFOX due to the oxaliplatin component. There is also no preference for biological agents if indicated. So for example, either Vectibix or Erbitux can be used if indicated. The rule of thumb with MCRC is to start off with intensive first-line or perhaps second-line therapy, which includes multiple agents, then move to less intensive therapy. As with most cancer types, sequencing is always a challenge, and there are limited studies to guide clinicians in this area. So we refer to guidelines, comorbid disease states, performance status, and so on. Next slide, Stephen. So this leads us to where does Stivarga fit in the landscape of MCRC? So this slide really serves as a brief review, and I think most of us have this experience with Stivarga. So I'm just going to briefly indicate that, Stivarga is for patients that have received standard therapy, and, the starting dose, or the standard starting dose is 160 milligrams for the first 21 days of a 28-day cycle. And again, I'll leave the slide. The slide will be available when they post it to the Ncoda site. Next slide, Stephen. So as we know, Stivarga is a multi-kinase inhibitor, or a dirty kinase, that touches upon various signaling pathways to ultimately elicit its anti-tumor activities. It hits up on prevention of metastases by blocking VEGF receptors 2 and 3, as well as platelet-derived growth factor receptors. Stivarga has an effect on tumor angiogenesis, or the development of new blood vessels to the tumor, by blocking VEGF receptors, TI2, and other receptors. It works on oncogenesis and blocking protein kinases such as KIT, RAF1, and RET. And lastly, it has been shown to disrupt tumor immunity by inhibiting colony-stimulating factor 1, which is involved in macrophage proliferation. The bottom line here is that it hits upon many different mechanisms to prevent tumor growth and metastases. And from this slide, you can truly see that Stivarga is a novel TKI, hitting upon so many receptors in multiple signaling pathways, which again leads us to its anti-tumor effects. Next slide, Stephen. So I'd like to move forward to briefly reviewing the known Stivarga studies that have displayed efficacy in MCRC. The correct trial that we all know, perhaps like the back of our hand, has led to the drug's approval. This was a phase 3 randomized placebo-controlled trial. 760 patients were randomized in a 2-to-1 fashion to receive either Stivarga, 160 milligrams daily for 3 weeks, then 1 week off, plus best supportive care, or placebo, plus best supportive care. Patients were continued on treatment until progression of disease or unacceptable toxicity. So this was a study that involved many countries and 4 different continents, and they had to receive all standard therapies that were currently approved at the time in 2010. The second trial I would like to touch upon is the phase 3 trial Concur, which had similar inclusion criteria, which they had to have standard therapies, but this study differed in that it was a smaller trial with a total of a little over 200 patients. It was also a trial performed in Asian patients only who progressed after standard therapy, similar to the CORRECT trial. Another major difference between this trial and the CORRECT trial is that the patients did not have to receive a prior anti-VEGF or anti-EGFR therapy prior to randomization. That was not included in the inclusion criteria. Next slide, Stephen. Okay, so here are the results of the trial. Again, this is probably reviewed for most of you, but looking at the primary endpoint for the CORRECT trial, you do see that there's a statistically significant difference here with regorafenib of 6.4 months versus placebo. Progression-free survival, there's also a difference here, 1.9 versus 1.7 in placebo. And then moving on to the Concur trial, please note that 40% of patients did not receive a prior anti-VEGF or an anti-EGFR before randomization. So keep this in mind as we review the data. Here again, you do see that overall survival benefit with regorafenib, as well as the PFS benefit here. There were no new safety signals reported with the Concur trial, and so that I think is important to note as well. Next slide. Let's talk about safety. So in general, we've gotten much of our safety data from the phase 3 trials, CORRECT and Concur. In addition, a large prospective open label phase 3B trial, the Consign trial, which had close to 3,000 patients, assess safety as their primary objective, and there were no new safety signals identified. So it's nice to have that additional data here. This is a summary, and I think we're all, again, familiar with this data, but you know, as we're all dealing with all these oral oncolytics and IV oncolytics, it's nice to refer to a table. It's hard to keep this all in our mind, and so definitely making sure that we're going back to the package insert and referring to this. Next slide. So I'd like to switch gears and discuss the IMblaze 370 trial. As many of you know, microsatellite instability, or MSI, which is a genetic mutation resulting from DNA mismatch repair, has come into play in colorectal cancer. So patients are now screened for microsatellite status, and if there is a microsatellite instability, patients may be able to receive immunotherapy, specifically a PD-1 inhibitor plus or minus ipilimumab. So in the IMblaze trial, previously treated patients with MCRC that had known microsatellite status were included in an intention to treat patient population, and they were randomized in a 2-to-1-to-1 fashion to receive atezolizumab at a lower dose every 2 weeks, plus Cotelic, which is a MEK1, MEK2 inhibitor, so combination therapy, or atezolizumab at the standard dosing at Q3 weeks, or regorafenib standard dosing. And the primary endpoint here was overall survival. Next slide, Stephen. Okay, so the results of the IMblaze 370 study are here. The results were presented at ESMO World GI Congress 2018, and these are the results of 363 patients that were randomized. So important to note on this slide is that when you look at the microsatellite status and you're evaluating that, 91.7% of patients had microsatellite stable or microsatellite unstable low. And then it's important to note that there were a percentage of patients that had missing microsatellite status. So when you look at the primary endpoint, the combination therapy of the PD-1 plus Cotelic, you had 8.9 months versus 8.5 months with regorafenib, which was not statistically significant. And so the objective response rates are listed here, and I'm quickly going over this with time in mind. With regards to treatment-related toxicities, the combination therapy, you had 45% versus regorafenib 49%. So the bottom line here is atezolizumab plus Cotelic and atezolizumab monotherapy did not demonstrate a statistically significant overall survival benefit versus regorafenib. So the primary endpoint was not met in this trial. Next slide. Another relatively new study that has come into our practices is the REDOSE study. And this was a phase 2 trial where they randomized patients into 4 different groups here, and there's 2 different arms. So they're randomized in a 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 fashion, where they either received in arm A regorafenib at low dose or escalating doses with in arm 1A preemptive strategy to treat palmar-plantar, and they use clobetasol for preemptive treatment. And then the only difference with arm A2 is that it was a reactive strategy and using the cream for palmar-plantar. And then in arm B, they compared it to patients with standard regorafenib therapy with the 3 weeks on, 1 week off there. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see how they started the escalating doses in arm A, where week 1 was at 80, then week 2 was at 120, and then week 3 at 160, and then of course week 4 there was no dosing. Here the primary endpoint was the number of patients finishing cycle 2 at 8 weeks. Next slide. So looking at the results, we're looking at, again, the primary endpoint, a percentage of patients finishing cycle 2 in 2 weeks with intentions of starting cycle 3. So when you look at the escalating doses where they started 80 milligrams and they ended at the 160, you've got a higher percentages of patients at 43% versus the standard dose of 24% finishing cycle 2 in 8 weeks. So here in the REDOSE trial, the primary endpoint was met. Next slide. So identifying patients for Stivarga, I think, again, we do have experience with this. It has been available and on the market. And when I think about our patients at the University of Illinois, obviously know that they have had to have completed standard chemotherapy or therapy. But when I think of patients that, these that are good for, good patients for Stivarga, I think about patients that have received FOLFOX or FOLFIRI, standard chemotherapy that have experienced hematological toxicities where we've had to dose reduce or had to use something like Neulasta or Neupogen. So these are patients that perhaps would benefit from using Stivarga versus perhaps some of the other treatments available. Obviously, these are oral oncolytics, so you want patients that are adherent. And so, identifying these patients early on is very important because keeping in mind, most of the previous treatments are IV regimens. Good performance status, of course, is something, and in the trials, they looked at patients with performance status of 0 and 1. And then again, with oral oncolytics, we want these patients to have excellent communication skills, specifically with healthcare providers, so that they're letting us know if they're experiencing any toxicities. Next slide. So I'm kind of rushing over here, but with takeaway points, I think we know that regorafenib efficacy has been validated, and we have shown here that it's been validated in the CORRECT and the Concur trials. We know that there's adverse events, and many of us have dealt with this, and we know that it requires frequent monitoring and dose reductions might be required. We also know, I think, as a clinical pearl, that hand, foot, skin reactions are painful. It's something that patients may or may not understand because this may be the first time they're experiencing this. So counseling these patients up front, explaining to them not to be afraid to tell us if they're even experiencing a little bit of this pain and just this discomfort up front so that we can manage this and identify it before we have to dose reduce or before we have to really make a decision there. And then again, the primary endpoint of the REDOSE study was met. And here, this has been included in the NCCN guidelines, so that's important to note. And so this is a dose escalation that can be employed in patients and should be considered. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thanks again, Latha. What we'll do in the interest of time is we'll have members submit questions either through the Q&A box or chat box, and we will follow up with them via email at a later date. So thank you again, Latha. Next up, Patrice Brown, Vice President of Programs at the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, will speak about her organization and how they are helping support patients and their families. Patrice.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to participate. In the interest of time, I will likely go through this pretty quickly, but certainly am available for any follow-up questions. So who are we? We are an organization that really has a vision of a world free of colorectal cancer. And the way that we do that is through supporting current patients and families and caregivers and survivors, as well as focusing on preventative measures. Another way we do that is through supporting research, and I'll talk through that a bit on the next few slides. So a little bit about our history. We are actually the combination of two separate organizations. So in 1999, there was a World Cancer event here in DC, and 40 people that came here with a connection to colorectal cancer realized that there was not one organization at the time that was specific to colon cancer. And then separately, in 2006, the CRISPR Life Foundation was founded when our current CEO, Michael Sapienza, his mother was diagnosed and ultimately passed away from colon cancer. Their focus was mainly research. So there was a merger of the two organizations in 2016, and then in 2017, we rebranded to the Colorectal Cancer Alliance to be more inclusive of those rectal cancer patients that we currently support and service. Next slide, please. So we have three main pillars, and I'll highlight each one of them. On the next slide, what you'll see is our dedication to patient and family support. Now, this is where we were primarily founded. And what we do here is make sure that we can empower patients through a whole host of services and opportunities, mainly focusing on psychosocial support, but also making sure that they have access to resources that can help them through their cancer journey. We hold a national conference every year. Last year, we did it in conjunction with MD Anderson. The year prior was at Cleveland Clinic. This year, our focus will be at Dana-Farber. And the goal with these conferences is to connect patients with each other, but then also make sure that they are in front of leading experts in the field that can help inform them and give them tools and resources to work with their healthcare providers. We also have a team of certified patient navigators that man our helpline and are there to answer questions and offer support to folks that call into us. But in addition to that, we also host some online groups. We have a private Facebook group called Blue Hope Nation, and it currently has almost 11,000 members who are in there on a daily basis, asking each other questions, providing support, and making sure that no one feels alone. One of the other things that we do that I'm really proud that we are able to offer is a financial assistance program, because as I'm sure you all know, these medications are not inexpensive, and for those folks that have access to minimal insurance or actually don't have insurance, the financial burden can be devastating. And so we offer both financial support to those that are currently in treatment. It's a one-time stipend, as well as those that are looking for screening assistance. I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about our prevention reports. And then in addition, we offer a clinical trial finder. And what's great about that is we want to make sure that patients have access to clinical trials. As you well know, clinical trials are not a form of last resort. We want to make sure that folks have access to that. So we do offer a clinical trial finder that allows the participant to segment the trial information based on biomarkers, locations, a whole host of other screeners, so that they can be connected to trials that might best match them. In addition, on our clinical trial finder, patients do have the ability to email trial information to their healthcare provider so that they can make informed decisions together. I'll go on now to talk a little bit about our prevention pillar. And with that pillar, what we're trying to do is make sure that folks don't get this disease in the first place. So how can we ensure that people are aware of the types of screenings that are available, whether it be FIT or colonoscopy or sigmoidography or all of the other things that are available to them. There is actually a blood test that's not yet approved by the Preventative Task Force, but has been in the works for some time. So how can we ensure that folks are aware of the different screening modalities, and then can make an informed decision from that point forward? In addition, March is National Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. We have a really large awareness campaign that we will be launching next week. Very excited about that. Let's just say we'll be taking advantage of the word assume and looking forward to raising awareness, not only of the disease, but also how it can be prevented. And part of the way we do that is through our Undie Run Walk series that we hold in 22 cities across the country. And the proceeds from those run walks help to provide funding to our Blue Hope partners. And those are not only screening and prevention partners, but also research partners across the country. And then I'll just, in the interest of time, pop over and talk a little bit about research. And where we are there is we have our CRISPR for Life research program, where we collaborate with research institutions across the country. In 2017, we also launched our peer review research program, and our goal is to invest $10 million in research by 2021. And we awarded our first grant in 2017, focused on young onset, to Dr. Weinberg from Lombardi at Georgetown. This past November, we also awarded in our second cycle 3 grants focused on young onset, 1 on rectal, and are actually closing out our prevention grant on the 18th of this month, and we'll be launching cycle 3 in June. So a lot of activity going on here at the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, and certainly available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks so much, Patrice. And what we'll do is, if any of our members do have questions, if we field those and they come in, we'll be happy to connect them with you and your team so that we can continue to collaborate. But thank you again for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Next up, Marie Garcia, Director of Clinical Operations at Virginia Cancer Specialists, will speak about next week's Spring Forum in Denver, Colorado. Marie.
Hi, and welcome. So we are 1 week away from a kickoff of our 2019 Ncoda Spring Forum. Our theme for this forum is leading the way in oral chemotherapy care within the medically integrated pharmacy model. Backed by popular demand, we are going to, on Friday, March the 1st, have 3 clinical tracks, concurrent sessions starting at 1 o'clock, going till 4:15 p.m. You can choose to go into the clinical track, the operations track, or the business track. You are not wedded to go into one or the other. You can pick and choose based on the 3 offerings. In the clinical track, you can learn about workflow management for IV and oral therapies, navigating OCM care and MIPS, or you can come to the track that I'm leading, which is effective practices in patient navigation, where we're going to have an interactive session on building your own patient navigation program within your practice. The operations track, we have the value of waste reduction and cost avoidance. We have how to be successful in credentialing and accreditations, as well as tracking prescriptions filled by mail order obstacles and solutions. In the third track, we're offering for business track is oral oncology contracting, DIRVs and state laws and regulations, as well as the navigating the prior authorizations and patient-assisted maze. We're excited that these 3 sessions, breakout sessions, you get to pick and choose which you'd like to go to, and they have offered a great wealth of knowledge from key people who are participating at their local practice level. Just a couple updates on making sure that you check your emails today. You were sent an email what what to know when you get there. This is just an email that tells you about the logistics. Make sure you check your emails for that. It was sent out early this morning. A reminder that Ncoda supports via match for $10. You can wear jeans to the forum. Make sure also that you download your Ncoda app before you come. The app is a great way to connect with people. It's also a great way to make sure you're in the right place at the right time. As well, it's a very interactive app where you can ask questions. If you're a person that doesn't like to get up in front of people and ask questions, you can submit your questions to the speaker through the app itself. We look forward for everybody coming. Safe travels, and we'll see you in Denver. Hopefully, I think the weather is forecasted at about 50. I'm sure we'll see snow on the mountaintops, but hopefully no snow at the Sheraton. See you there.
Thanks, Marie. And should anyone have questions leading up to the forum, please contact our meeting coordinator, Kristen Ray, and her email is listed on the slide below. We have a very timely current issues and effective practices presentation by Jonathan Medeiros, Government Relations, U.S. Policy at Pfizer. This presentation was developed in collaboration with Tom Brownlee, Director of U.S. Policy at Pfizer. Jonathan will be giving a presentation on policy and legislative updates as it relates to the Accumulator program. Jonathan.
Thank you, Stephen, for the introduction, and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. So over the next few minutes, we'll be discussing accumulator adjustment programs and some of the policy and legislative developments that have been happening at both the state and the federal level to prevent their use. But before we get into some of that work, I just want to do a quick refresher on what is an accumulator adjustment program for all of us on the phone. So an accumulator adjustment program is a benefit design that's been offered by pharmacy benefit managers, and it's often provided to employers to prevent the use of copay assistance programs for prescriptions from counting towards a patient's deductible or annual out-of-pocket max. Now, traditionally, and before these programs, copay assistance and other support resources from pharmaceutical companies or manufacturers would count towards the patient's deductible and annual out-of-pocket cap when a patient pays for medication. Now, when an accumulator adjustment program is utilized, copay assistance may be used, but the patient will still need to satisfy their full out-of-pocket cost maximum for the year. So just a quick example to help illustrate this. Let's say a patient that's using a copay resource from a manufacturer for a treatment, it covers their cost for 4 months, but starting in May, they would need to start paying their deductible because the assistance would run out. This is different than in a normal scenario of having the assistance count in January for the patient towards their deductible. And as you can imagine, this can create unexpected financial hardships for patients later on in the calendar year. So for a quick educational resource and really a great backgrounder on the issue, I would encourage all of you to look at the Ncoda accumulator adjustment resource that they put together. And it's a great backgrounder. And then on one side of it, it provides a good graphic of two receipts, one showing a cost exposure example for a patient where there isn't an accumulator adjustment program and one where there is. So given the increased burden and hardship that's been observed, and Stephen, if we can move to slide 2, 5 states have introduced legislation to address this issue. At the state level, the objective of these bills is to ensure that any assistance that's provided to patients for a prescription counts towards the deductible and the annual out-of-pocket cap. Now, legislation at the state level would apply to any state-regulated commercial plan. And then at the bottom of the slide there, at the federal level, CMS recently published their Notice of Benefit and Payment Parameters. It was actually published on January 17th. And CMS proposes these rules annually to set forth regulation for the ACA. And of course, these regulations would apply to all commercial plans across the US. So amongst all the proposed rules that was provided on January 17th, there was one accumulator proposal that would exclude the use of coupons or copay assistance from counting towards a patient's annual out-of-pocket cap for brands that have an AB rate equivalent. So this rule has been interpreted different ways, and many stakeholders are submitting comments to CMS to get some more clarification on what this means. But one way that this has been interpreted is that this proposed rule could mean that these programs or copay accumulator programs are not allowed outside of the proposed rule. So for example, an accumulator adjuster program could not apply to specialty medications where there is no generic equivalent. And as many of you could imagine, these are the type of treatment scenarios where patients often need the assistance the most, and thus copay accumulator adjustment programs would not be allowed in these scenarios for these patients. So the last thing I'll say, just to sum up this presentation, the one thing that's stakeholders that are engaging on this issue at both the state and federal level, what they're looking for are examples and stories of where this might be occurring, patient examples, or maybe from physicians where they're interacting with patients. So if there are any examples that you're seeing out there, and Stephen, I'll volunteer you and Ncoda to pass them along to you, because I know this is a priority policy and engagement issue for your organization to do that, because the stories are definitely needed. And with that, once again, thank you for the opportunity for us to join the call.
Yes, Jonathan, thank you. And Tom, we really appreciate the education, and we'd be happy to forward any of those stories along. And as Jonathan mentioned, Ncoda has created an informational trifold pamphlet regarding copay accumulators. To obtain copies of these educational trifolds for your practices and patients, please email contact@ncoda.org. Jonathan, again, thank you. Ncoda's treatment support kit beta test has been ongoing for the last few months. 24 member practices nationwide have received a total of 240 capecitabine treatment support kits. 2 versions of the capecitabine kit were designed to test different deliverables as well as different product variables. Beth Delasky, pharmacy manager at Willamette Valley Cancer Institute in Oregon, will now speak about her experience in the TSK beta test. Beth.
Thank you, Stephen. We received the 10 kits, as you said. Some of them came in a box, some came in a bag. They had varied contents. We really preferred the bags just because they were a little bit easier to manage, but patients didn't really seem to have a preference. We found the kits to be very useful. Overall, we used the urea cream and the lip balm and the thermometer the most when we were counseling patients. And our feedback was that all the kits should have the thermometer and pill counter. We found that we got that feedback from patients as well. It was a great tool to have those resources available as we were counseling patients, rather than telling them, this is what you need and now go to the store and buy it. They were very well received by our patients, and we're excited to continue to use them.
Thank you, Beth, for your testimonial. And thank you to all of our 24 TSK beta test practice sites seen here on this slide. Next up, Carol Hemmersbach, chair of Ncoda's Oncology Pharmacy Technician Association, also known as OPTA, will provide us with an update on the association. Carol.
I'm so sorry. Thanks, Stephen. OPTA, the Oncology Pharmacy Tech Association's mission is to support and encourage the professional development of oncology centers and medically integrated dispensing clinics nationwide. We, as an association, will strive to strengthen and empower dispensing staff in their increasingly vital role by providing leadership and sharing knowledge to ensure better outcomes for patients. So right now, we're the first organization, professional organization, to encourage the growth of oncology pharmacy techs. We are over 80 strong now and hoping to grow. We are, you can go to the next slide. We are working on a couple things right now that, as far as creating CE and possibly creating a program for certification for oncology pharmacy techs. And we welcome everybody to join. It's about pharmacy techs helping pharmacy techs. Thank you.
Great, Carol, thank you. And for those interested in joining, please visit the Ncoda website under Oncology Pharmacy Tech Association, and you'll find the application link there. Thanks, Carol. Along with Opta, are you looking for ways to take advantage of your Ncoda membership in 2019? Here at Ncoda, we pride ourselves on collaborating with our members. Here are some ways you can become an active participant within Ncoda. There are 7 great committees that are always looking to add active participants. Ncoda can also assist with setting up Be the Match donor drives at your practice. If you want to learn more about how you can get involved in Ncoda committees and initiatives, or how you can host a Be the Match donor drive, please visit ncoda.org or email us at contact@ncoda.org. Matt Schultz will now speak about a great platform available to all Ncoda members to ask questions, contribute to the conversation, and collaborate. This platform is called Ncoda Discussions. Matt.
Thanks. Much like Stephen has shared, Discussion Board serves as an easy medium for us to connect with our colleagues. You'll find it on the website under Member Resources and Ncoda Discussions. Here we can stay current with hot topics in oncology in between the 2 national meetings. We do encourage you to share your stories. Here we can collectively identify potential gaps in patient care in a quick and collaborative fashion, whether it be about clinical management, a particular insurance barrier, questions about certification, really anything. We do encourage you to share your best practices with a larger group and improve cancer care nationwide. When starting a topic, it is important to check the box that will update you via email when a response is made. As you can see on this slide, it's right at the bottom there to notify me of follow-up replies. That will help you stay current with what's coming in. In addition, look for future IT upgrades to make this service even smoother for the users. Go ahead and start a topic today. Thank you all.
Thanks, Matt. I would like to share some exciting news regarding Ncoda's commitment to developing professional student organizations on college campuses nationwide. Over the last few months, we have been working with colleges and universities nationwide to offer pharmacy students membership into chapters of the Ncoda Professional Student Organization. There are a wide range of benefits for students, including opportunities to attend national meetings and network with oncology healthcare professionals, opportunities to help create new educational materials that will positively impact cancer patients nationwide, as well as opportunities to get involved in community service events. With the help of University of Rhode Island College of Pharmacy student Rebecca Coravesi, Ncoda was able to establish our 2nd student chapter this month on the campus of URI College of Pharmacy. So far, more than 50 students have joined the chapter. More Ncoda student chapters will be established across the country throughout 2019, so stay tuned. URI College of Pharmacy joined South University School of Pharmacy in Columbia, South Carolina, as one of Ncoda's first student chapters established. Thank you to all of our speakers for their great discussions and presentations today. Thanks again to our Clinical Corner sponsor, Bayer. Last but not least, thank you to all of our members. Your continued participation and support is vital in our quest to improve patient care. If you have any questions about anything that was discussed today, please email contact@ncoda.org. Our next national monthly webinar is on Thursday, March 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern. We hope you can join us. From all of us at Ncoda, thanks for joining and enjoy the rest of your day.